Hello, and welcome to another Minecraft video in what is probably we're in the final stretch of this series now. I'm not exactly sure how many videos are left before I stop explicitly making Minecraft videos, but we're definitely into the single digits. So yeah, in this video, we are going to make basic water. So what I mean by basic water is just water blocks, essentially, with transparency and basic animation. No flowing water yet. I'm a bit torn as to whether to make a flowing water video, because I will have covered every step that you need to make flowing water by the time, like within two videos, this video and the next video for the Minecraft series will have gotten us to the point where we've covered everything we need for flowing water. It would just be a matter of you putting the pieces together, and I don't know if I want to make a video explicitly on that because it would be 90% going over what I've already covered. So I'm gonna have a think about that one. But in this one, we're gonna make basic water. So the first thing we want to do is create a new type of block for the water. So if we go over to our world component and we want to go down to our block types, and we're just going to add a new block. So this is going to be block 15. It really doesn't matter which number you give it. You could set it to block 2, you could set it to block 99. The important thing is that you know which one it is. And then for now, well, actually, it doesn't really matter what this is. I'm just going to set it to 0. But like I say, it's completely irrelevant for what we're doing because we're going to be setting the texture in a different way for the water block. The only thing we need to do is, for now, we need to leave is solid true, because the way our system is currently set up is we use is solid to decide whether to draw blocks, and we want to draw the block. So we need it to be solid. That is going to mean that the player is going to be able to walk on water, but we've got to revamp the player control system in one of those few remaining videos anyway. So we'll deal with how the player handles water when we redo the player controller. And we want it to render neighbor faces because water's transparent, so you can see through it. So we want it to render the faces around the water block. Opacity, if you remember, opacity here just means for the lighting. It doesn't mean the actual transparency of the block. It means how much light gets through. So I'm just going to set it to 7, which is about halfway. You can mess around with it, set it to whatever you want. Icon, I'm just going to leave as glass. I'm not making a new icon for every block when I'm just sorting the mechanisms out and getting the game mechanics working. So next up, we need an actual voxel mesh data class for this, because as you'll know, the water is a slightly different shape. It's like a shorter block. I'm not entirely sure how much shorter. I'm going to eyeball it rather than look it up. But if we go into data, go into voxel meshes, and we're just going to copy our standard block, and we'll rename that water block. And then what we want to do here is basically right now we have all these Y values set to 1, and the 1 is because like our blocks are all 1 by 1 by 1. The 1 value on the Y axis represents 1 in vertical space. Now we're not going to 1 in vertical space with the water block, because the water block, as I said, is a little bit shorter than a normal block. So what I've decided to go with is I'm going to make all the 1 values on the side to 0.875. And what that does is that basically takes the block down 2/16, which is the equivalent to 2 pixels on the texture, assuming you are using 16 by 16 textures. So I'll speed through this part, but basically all of the 1s I'm going to change to 0.875, except for the UV coordinates on the top and bottom. I'm going to speed through this. I'll just fast forward while I change all these values, but basically everything except for the UV coordinates on the top and bottom needs to be changed from 1 to 0.875. Okay, so that's that done. And then if we go into our world and we want to drag that onto our new water block. Okay, so let's just do a quick test. So we're in the game. If I pull up the inventory window, and our last glass block here is the one that we've set to our stone block, which is, well, our water block, which has got the stone texture because we just set it all to 0. So I'm going to stick that in on the end there. And then if we place this down somewhere, we should find we have a slightly shorter stone block. There we go. And I'll just stick another block to the side of it so you can see it is actually short. So that's that. So obviously there's a lot more to go. The next thing we want is to make a water shader. To start off with that, we're just going to go and copy our transparent shader. And we'll call that water shader. And then for now, we don't really need to do anything inside the shader, but we do need to rename it. Because as you can see, it has the name up here. So let's just rename that water shader. And then we need to do another copy paste with our materials. And we want to copy paste the transparent blocks material. And we'll just rename it water block material. And then go up to here and find it, which is in Minecraft water shader. Nothing's changed yet. But we will have, this is the only thing I've done off camera, by the way, is I imported these 2 water textures, which are just 2 water textures I grabbed out of I can't remember where I got them from. I think the internet somewhere. But it's just the water texture. I've only got 2. You might want to use more. You might just want to use 1. I don't know. Both ways would work. You could cycle through several of them, or you could just have 1 that moves around a bit and fades in and out. So for now, we're just going to use the 1. So drag that into our texture. The only thing I will say about these water things is I have them set to repeat, not clamp. That's the only difference from all the other textures that I've dragged in this project, is that this needs to be on repeat, at least for the way I do it anyway. Oh, and also I should point out, I'm kind of cheating here by having the water be its own texture. Ideally, you would work out a system where you have your water texture in your texture atlas and you keep everything together. I'm not doing that because it would mean, like I was saying before, it would mean going over a lot of code that I've already done, and I don't want to... I'm trying to avoid doing any steps off camera if possible. Like, I don't want there to be... And then you do this and this and this moment and not show it. So rather than either bore you with stuff that we've already done or do stuff without showing you, we're just going to bodge this. You get the idea. If you want to do it so that it's in your texture atlas, just look back at how we got stuff out of a texture atlas and do the same thing. So now we're going to want to open up our world.cs, and we want to add a new material for water. And then if we go right down to the bottom where we have our block types, we're going to add a new bool in here. Public bool is water. And before we forget, let's just go into Unity and set those values. So for world, we want to drag in our new material to here. And then if we just go down to just the water block and set that to is water. So now back to our scripts, and we want to open up our chunk script. So the first thing we need to do is to change this material array declaration here. We need it to be 3, not 2. And we also need to create another list to hold our additional triangles for the water, which we'll just call water triangles. All very imaginative naming going on here. And then down here where we actually set our materials, yep, down here, just copy that again. And we want to say 2 this time, and we're setting it to water material. Now if we scroll down to update mesh data, which is where all the magic happens regarding drawing the chunks, and right down here, so here we've got a bit where we choose whether we're drawing a transparent block or a solid block, like solid as in see-through, not solid as in physically there. So render neighbor faces means that not render neighbor faces means it's a solid block. Otherwise, it's a transparent block. So if it's not render neighbor faces, we're adding it to normal triangles. If it is render neighbor faces, we're adding it to transparent. So in here, we're going to have an additional check. So if we are rendering neighbor faces, we want to check if it is water. So we'll say if voxel.properties is water, and then it's going to be an else. And if it is not water, then we do what we've been doing before, which is just add it to the transparent triangles. But if it is water, just copy that. We want to add it to the water triangles. Everything's exactly the same. We're just adding the triangles to a different submesh. And speaking of adding to a submesh, we need to actually come down here and take care of that part. So we now have 3 submeshes, and we want to set our 3rd submesh. So set that to 2. And then this is water triangles. So now let's just run this and see what happens. Grab our test water block. And there we go. I mean, obviously it looks terrible because we haven't done any of the texture setting up, but it is using the new shader. And the new shader just has 1 texture, which we need to give it proper UV coordinates for, but we are actually in operation. Like, it is, the part that we've done is working. So before we go any further, what I'm going to do, just so that we don't have to keep going into our inventory and dragging out our water block, is insert our water block into the world generation algorithm. So I'm not going to do anything too fancy with this. All we're going to do is we're going to have a sea height, a sea level height, and we're going to tell the game that if a block is an air block below a certain level, which will be our sea level, but above the terrain height, then just make it water. So if we go down to, if we go up to get voxel, yep, there, and the bit where we return air, there. So this bit here, if the Y position is above terrain height, we're just returning 0, which is air. So what we want to do here is we want to do a check. So let's just enclose this in some curly brackets, and then in here we're going to say if Y pos is less than 51. I'm putting 51. I'm hard coding 51 in here. Obviously, you would not want to do it this way. You would want to have a variable like in voxel data or something, and then you'd say if Y pos is less than sea level, and you would set the sea level data value. I'm going to try and avoid like doing everything the way that I would do it if I were making it properly, because I'm giving off the impression that I'm showing everyone how to make a production ready game, and that's really not the case. This is meant to be, I'm showing you the methods and then you go off and make your game. Please, for the love of God, nobody take this I mean, you're welcome to take this code and turn it into it and use it in your game, but I really would not recommend doing it without some serious modification. So if it is less than 51, so if we're in this if statement here, we're above the terrain, we've already checked that, Y position is above the terrain height. If it's less than 51, then we're going to return 14, which is the ID of the water block, and then just say else return 0. So if we give that a little run, we should find we have C now of a sort. There we go. And again, it doesn't look right, obviously, and also we can walk on it because the character controller doesn't distinguish between solid, like physically solid and visibly solid, but we'll fix that when we get to the character controller part. But we have kind of C. So let's start making it look more like C. And the first thing we're going to do is make it so that, I think we've already got it open. And the first thing we're going to do is make it so that it's a little bit transparent. So we need to make a few changes in here. The first one is we go up to where lighting is up here, and we want to change this to Z right off, blend source alpha. That should be on a new line. Blend source alpha 1 minus source alpha. And also this wants to be transparent. And this also wants to be transparent, and I believe we can get rid of this. And now if we go down to where we return our color, and then just for testing purposes, let's just say col.a equals 0. I'm going to go with 5, half transparent. Oh, we've got an error. That's because I've misspelled alpha. And I missed the semicolon off of the end of there. Okay, so now we have transparent water, and now that it's transparent, we can immediately see some of the problems that we have to deal with. So if I just zoom out here and get a better view if we look from the side. So you can see that we're drawing all of the faces, and that's especially a problem in like where the water blocks meet, because there's this gap because we're not drawing a full block. So we need to deal with that. So the easiest way to get rid of, well, sorry, I don't know if I've mentioned this already. I'm not actually working off of any technical information or looking into like wikis on how Minecraft actually does it. I'm basically just looking at the game and working out how I would replicate what I'm seeing. So with that in mind, I've got a couple of rules that the water block, remember this is not flowing water, this is just standard like sat there not doing anything water blocks. So I've got a couple of rules for what they need to do, like behavior wise, and that is, one, we never draw the sides at all, because you're never going to see a water block side, because in a world that doesn't have flowing water, there is no such thing as a water block side, because you wouldn't have water just floating off in the air not doing anything. And in a world that does have flowing water, you never see the sides because there would be flowing water at the sides. So for these particular blocks, we never need to see the sides, so we're not going to render them at all. And then for the top, we're only going to, so that means that, sorry, to clarify, that means that we're only going to be drawing the top. We don't need the bottom, we don't need the sides. We're only ever going to be drawing the top of the water. However, we do not need to draw the top of the water if it is below another water block, because, you know, it doesn't stack up like that. You only need to see the topmost, like, mesh of water. So let's deal with that. The easiest way I decided to get rid of the sides was to go into our voxel mesh data and just get rid of the sides. And we can do that by setting these values, setting the, you know, the number of vert data and the number of triangles to 0. So if we do that for everything except for the top one, and then we press play again, okay, we've got rid of the sides, and it's starting to look a bit more like proper water already. And the lighting, because we set the opacity, we get a sort of natural lighting effect from the water, because the deeper the water, the darker the blocks at the bottom are. So that's a nice side effect to the way we've coded things. So as you can see, we've still got the problem of the tops though. Like we've still got stacked water there. So that's the next problem that we need to look at. And the way we're going to handle that is if we go into chunk and we want to go to, where is it? Here. So this is the part where we're saying basically we're saying, do we need to draw this face? And all we're saying is if the neighbor is not null and the neighbor says that we have to draw faces, then draw the face. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert another clause here. We're going to say, and, so if the neighbor's not null and the neighbor says render faces, and then not in brackets, because we've got multiple clauses, so we want this not to be true. Voxel.properties.isWater, and so both of these things have to be true. Chunk map dot map. All right. No, chunk data dot map. Sorry. Chunk data dot map x y plus 1 z dot properties dot is water. Brackets on the end there. No, I have not. I've got too many brackets. Yes, I have. Okay, so what that is essentially one true false value that has two clauses. So we're saying if this current voxel is water and the one above it is water. And just a quick note here, this y plus 1 here, this will give you an out of bounds error if the block that is being checked is the highest block, is at the highest position you can have in your world. So I've warned you. It's like I say, I'm going to try and avoid adding stuff like that in, because it's just, I found that my videos get, I don't know, 20, 30, 40% longer just doing stuff like that. So it's not something that you guys know what you're doing with that. So let's give that a try. Okay. Looks like we've got rid of all our sides. And we have got rid of the tops as well. Just have a quick look. There we go. And stuff like the texture, the screen sort of changing a bit to show that you're underwater, that would all be handled by the character controller. So all that's left to do now is to just make it look a bit more like water, because right now it's just blue. So if we go back into our chunk script, and somewhere down here, right, this add texture. So I want to do a check here, and we're going to say if voxel.properties.isWater, and then what we're doing here is, because this get texture function, if you remember, it takes a voxel ID and it works out where it is in the atlas. So 0 is in the top left hand corner, 256 will be in the bottom right hand corner, or whatever the final number is, 255. We don't need to do that with this, because with this we've just got the one texture, so like there's no working out where it is. If it says 0 0 it's top left, if it says 1 1 it's bottom right. So we don't need to work it out, we just need to pass the value in directly. So we're just going to say uvs.add voxel.properties.meshData.faces p, which gets us our current face, dot vert data I, which gets us our current vert, dot uv, which gets us the uv vector 2 associated with that vert. And then we'll just say else being if it's not water, we just do what we did before. Oh, and just before I forget, sorry, up here, I should have said this at the time, up here where we use chunk data map y plus 1, the reason I did that rather than using like any of this is because this is contextual. This, like, the block can be rotated. Really, we should be setting it so that you can't rotate a water block, but I haven't got anything in place for rotatable and non-rotatable blocks. So I want this to be checking the absolute up, not the up relative to the block's sort of origin position. So if we've rotated the block on its side, we don't want it to be checking to the side, we want it to be checking up. So let's just check that, and we should find we have a water texture. And there we go. But obviously it needs to be animated, so I'm just going to pause this, pause the game that is, and leave that running, because the rest of what we're doing is in the shader. And obviously we don't need to restart the game for shader changes to take effect. So let's go into our shader. I'm going to go up to the top here, and we're going to add a second texture, secondary text, which we're going to call second texture, I guess. Which equals white as the same as the other one. Basically, it's identical to the other one. Let's actually just call this first texture as well. And then we need to declare that. So down here somewhere, there, we'll just copy that. Secondary text. And then I will go into our, it's not going to change anything yet because we haven't done anything with this information, but let's just go into our material and drag in that second texture. And now, this bit's remarkably easy compared, considering everything that we've done. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to modify the X value slightly. the x UV coordinate value, sorry. So UV.x, and we're going to say plus equals sine time dot x. So sine time gets you sine, like it's like an oscillating value between, I think, -1 and 1, or it might be 0 and 1, I'm not sure. Either way, it's a float 4, and the x, y, z, w value each give you different variants of that. So I think x is a 10th of it, or it might be an 1/8 of it, or something like that, whereas w is a full. So basically, if you go x, you get slower, basically, and then if you go with w, it's faster, and then the ones in between are in between. And I'm going to times that by 0.5, and then this we're going to change to text1, and then we're going to copy it and change and set this one to text2, and then this one obviously wants to be secondary text with an underscore, of course. And then finally, we're going to set that call value that we just deleted, fixed for call equals, and it's going to be a lerp between text1, text2, and then we're going to say 0.5 plus, and we're going to say w times 0.5. And I believe that should be it. So the effect is working, but it's a little bit subtle. So I mean, you can tweak the values. You get the idea. So it basically, the two textures sort of like move back and forth ever so slightly and fade in and out of each other. And you can mess with the textures, you can mess with the values. But that is basically it, for lack of a better word. So that is it for this tutorial, and I will be back in the not too distant future with one on block behavior, which is the last piece of the puzzle really. You need to be able to take what I've shown you and get flowing water working. Block behavior being like grass spreading and things like that. So yeah, once you've got that, you've got how to make water look like water, you've got how to make blocks be different shapes, and then you will have block behavior, and that's really all the things that you need to make flowing water. But I think I'm going to let you figure that one out by yourself, because like I say, me doing it in a video is going to involve going over things that I've done in those 3 videos almost entirely. But yeah, that's it for this video, and all that's left to do is to thank all my amazing Patreons and supporters and subscribers and people in the Discord, and everyone is worthy of thanks, but obviously the Patreon supporters are worthy of extra special thanks. The extra special thanks go to the Sugar Daddy / Mama supporters, who are Dave Maldine, Reg Reed, Gabriel White, Aaron Clark, Mr. Drunken Dragon, and Julian. So I believe I've mentioned it to quite a few of you, but I'm going to be entering a game jam after hosting one recently in about a week from when this video comes out. So there'll be a little bit of content about that, probably maybe an overview video. I don't know if I'm going to do a live stream or anything like that, but there'll be at least a video about it. And yeah, that's it. I'll be back soon. Take care. Bye-bye.